My name is Caroline Mitchell. I'm 30 years old, and 3 days ago I thought betrayal was just a word people tossed around in family arguments. That was before I returned early from my business trip in Seattle, suitcase still rolling behind me, and stopped at the bottom step of my porch. Through the crack of my front door, I overheard my sister's voice, low and urgent, as if she were hiding a secret too big to keep. "I've renovated her house. Don't say anything," Sophia whispered into her phone. My hand froze on the railing. I leaned closer, my breath caught in my throat. Then I heard my mother's voice on speaker, hushed but clear. "Good. She doesn't need all that space anyway. Keep it quiet until she signs something." The world tilted under me. I dropped my keys, the sound clattering like thunder against the wooden step. A silence fell inside the house, then muffled laughter. With my heart hammering, I pushed open the door, and my knees nearly buckled. The entryway I had chosen paint colors for with care was unrecognizable. Dust floated through the air, the smell of fresh plaster mixed with sharp paint fumes stung my nose. A wall that once framed the living room had been knocked down, beams exposed like broken ribs. My dining room was a wasteland of plastic sheeting and splintered wood. And standing in the middle, her chestnut hair tied in a messy bun, was Sophia. She held a clipboard in one hand and gestured with the other like she was the queen of this chaos. When she turned and saw me, she didn't flinch, didn't look ashamed. Instead, her lips curled into a smirk I'd known since childhood. "Caroline," she said brightly, like I had just walked into a surprise party. "You're back early." My throat tightened. Behind her, I saw Jake, her husband, leaning against the half-demolished kitchen counter, smirking too. And in the corner, their in-laws, the Pattersons, stood giving instructions to two workers, hauling out cabinets I had saved years to afford. I dropped my suitcase by the door, my voice barely above a whisper. What have you done to my house?" Sophia spread her arms as if presenting a gift. "We're renovating before moving in. Isn't it exciting? You'll thank us later. Moving in." The words scraped across my chest like glass. I need you to understand why this moment shattered me. This house, my 3-bedroom ranch in the quiet suburbs of Denver, wasn't just a piece of property. It was the first real proof of my independence. I had scraped together a down payment after 10 years of saving, working late nights at the marketing firm, picking up side gigs just to afford the mortgage. I'd spent weekends painting walls myself, choosing every tile for the bathroom, restoring the hardwood floors with my own 2 hands. This house was my inheritance of effort, the one thing I had built without handouts. Sophia had always been different. She was 5 years younger, and from the moment she was born, the darling of the family. I still remember being 12 when she ruined my favorite sweater, spilling grape juice all over it. I thought Mom would scold her, but instead, I was the one told, "Caroline, you're the big sister. You need to share with your little sister." That pattern never stopped. My toys became her toys. My clothes became her clothes. My achievements, when I made the honor roll, when I earned my driver's license, were barely acknowledged before the spotlight swung back to Sophia. By the time we were grown, it was more than toys and clothes. In high school, she borrowed my car without asking and dented the passenger door. In college, she dipped into my wallet, assuring me she'd pay it back soon. She never did. When I got my first apartment, she showed up with a suitcase after a fight with Mom and Dad, planning to stay for a weekend that turned into 3 months. Every time I gave in, because that was the unspoken family rule, Caroline carries the weight. When she called me in tears 2 months ago, begging for a place to stay because she and Jake had been evicted, I wanted to say no. Jake had always sneered at my job, calling it fake work compared to his auto shop labor. But I couldn't bear the thought of my sister being homeless. I told her, "You can stay on the pull-out couch in the living room, just until you find a new place." Sophia promised, wide-eyed, "We'll be so quiet you won't even know we're here." Now here I was, staring at my kitchen, gutted like a crime scene. The quartz countertops gone, the marble sink smashed, the clawfoot tub in the bathroom ripped out, all without my permission. Jake pushed off the counter, his grin widening. We figured, since you're always traveling with your fancy marketing campaigns, it made sense for us to settle in. Sophia loves this neighborhood. We'll make it a family home. The Pattersons nodded. Mrs. Patterson's sharp blonde hair sprayed into place chimed in. The layout was so outdated. We're opening it up, much more modern. And then I remembered the words I had overheard. I've renovated her house, don't say anything. My voice trembled, but I forced it out. This is my home. Who gave you the right? Sophia laughed softly, just like she did when we were girls, and I accused her of stealing. Come on, Caroline. Mom knows. She said you'd understand. What's yours is mine. That's what family means. I looked around at the wreckage, my wreckage, and I realized this wasn't just about broken walls or missing fixtures. This was about a lifetime of being told to give, to shrink, to surrender. That was the moment I understood this wasn't family drama anymore. This was a battle for everything I had built. And unless I found the courage to fight back, I was going to lose it all. Sophia's smirk burned in my mind long after I stumbled into what used to be my bedroom. The walls were stripped, bare, primer, smeared over the sage green I had chosen myself, the curtains torn down as if my taste had never mattered. My dresser drawers gaped open clothes, spilling out like entrails, and my bed sat in the middle of the room covered in a thin sheet of plastic. My sanctuary looked violated, ransacked, and I couldn't breathe. The echo of her voice rang in my ears, Mom knows. She said you'd understand. That single sentence cracked open something deeper, something that had been festering since childhood. My chest tightened as the memories flooded in. I was 13 when my parents forgot my birthday. Not entirely forgot, they gave me a card at dinner, but there was no cake, no candles, no party. We'll make it up to you next weekend, Mom had promised. That weekend came and went, and instead of celebrating me, the whole family was busy preparing for Sophia's 8th birthday bash. Balloons, ponies in the backyard, a magician who pulled doves from hats. I sat in the corner watching Sophia bask in applause while my unopened card wilted in my pocket. It was the same every holiday. At Thanksgiving, I helped Mom mash potatoes, set the table, serve dishes. When Sophia finally floated in late, still painting her nails, Mom beamed. Oh, honey, you look beautiful. We couldn't start without you. And Christmas, I will never forget the sting of Christmas. I had begged for a blue bicycle, saved clippings from catalogs, circled it in red. When I tore the wrapping off my box, there was no bike, just socks and a sweater. That afternoon, Dad wheeled out the bicycle. For Sophia, she needs it more, he explained gently. You're older, you can walk. I thought I'd buried those moments, but now staring at the whitewashed walls of my bedroom, they pulsed like fresh wounds. This was the same story, just on a larger scale. I was being erased again. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the empty wooden jewelry box I'd found, shoved under a pile of sweaters. My grandmother's brooch, the one she pinned to my dress at graduation, was gone. The locket she wore every Christmas, the one that still carried her scent of lavender soap, gone. My passport and birth certificate, too. My fingers shook as I ran them over the broken lock. A knock at the door made me flinch. The door creaked open without waiting for an answer, and Sophia strolled in, wiping plaster dust from her jeans. So what do you think? She asked with infuriating casualness. We're going to paint this light blue. It'll brighten things up. Jake needs space for his gaming setup, so we'll get rid of that old desk of yours. My voice came out raw. Who gave you permission to touch my things? She tilted her head, smile fading but not disappearing. Caroline, you said we could stay. We thought you meant for good. You're never here anyway. Why waste all this space on one person? My throat closed around words I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, This is my house. I paid for every brick. My name is the only one on the mortgage. Her eyes hardened, the pleading little sister gone, replaced by something colder. Don't be so selfish. Mom and Dad always said family shares. We're family. What's yours is mine. I wanted to grab her, shake her, but instead I just stared. This isn't sharing. It's stealing. Sophia's smile snapped back in place like a mask. You'll see. When it's finished, you'll love it. We're making it better for all of us. She walked out humming under her breath as if she hadn't just gutted me alive. I sat, frozen tears sliding down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with a lifetime of second place. For years, I'd told myself my parents' favoritism was just a quirk, a small injustice I could swallow. But now, it was tearing apart the one thing that was entirely mine. The house fell quiet for a moment, save for the thud of hammers in the distance. I forced myself to stand to move to check what else had been touched. In the closet, my shoes were piled haphazardly, some pairs missing. In the nightstand, bank statements had been rifled through pages, bent as if someone had studied them. My chest ached as realizations settled like stone. They weren't just moving in, they were stripping me down piece by piece. Downstairs, I heard Jake laugh, his voice smug and grating. Once this is done, she'll have no choice but to leave. Who'd want to live in a construction site? My breath caught. I crept closer to the stairwell, careful not to be seen. And there it was again, the sound that had started it all. Overheard words that changed everything. Sophia's voice carried a bit hushed but still sharp. Mom said she'd back me up. Caroline caves every time. She'll give in like always. I clutched the railing so tightly my knuckles whitened. They thought I was weak. They thought history would repeat itself, that I would surrender like I always had. I tiptoed back to my room, heart slamming against my ribs. My eyes scanned the wreckage, landing once more on the broken jewelry box. My grandmother's brooch wasn't just missing, it was stolen. My documents weren't misplaced, they were taken. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a takeover. I collapsed onto the plastic-covered mattress, burying my face in my hands. For the first time in my life, I wished my father were alive. He would have known what to do. He always told me, Caroline, a house is your shield. Never let anyone take it from you. His voice rang in my ears, now steadier than my own thoughts. The bedroom door creaked again. Sophia peeked in softer, this time her smile forced. Don't look so upset. Mom says this is for the best. You'll thank us when it's done. I stared at her, hollow and trembling. Mom said that. She nodded, almost smug. Of course, she understands. You'll understand too. The door shut with a click, and silence rushed in. My heart felt like it was splintering, but something else sparked beneath the pain, a sharp, glowing ember of fury. For decades, I'd been the dutiful sister, the responsible daughter, the one who sacrificed. But staring at the ruins of my bedroom, holding an empty box that once carried the weight of my family's history, I realized something vital. If I didn't fight now, I would lose everything. This wasn't just a renovation. This was war. I left my bedroom before dawn, the house still humming with the faint echo of yesterday's hammers. The air was heavy with dust, and paint my throat raw, as if the walls themselves were choking me. My suitcase sat abandoned in the foyer where I'd dropped it, but I didn't touch it. I needed proof. Proof that this wasn't paranoia, proof that what I'd overheard was real. Sophia's words haunted me. Mom said she'd back me up. The way she'd said it, so certain, so smug, made me sick. For years, my parents' favoritism had been obvious, but this was different. They weren't just indulging her, they were helping her take from me. My phone buzzed. A message from Linda in Seattle. Great work on the pitch. Clients are thrilled. Promotion talk is moving forward when you're back. For a moment, I closed my eyes, the irony biting. While my professional life reached a new peak, my personal life was crumbling into rubble. I moved down the hallway, the sound of voices drifting from the kitchen. Jake's tone was sharp, bragging. Once we invest enough in this place, she can't kick us out. Constructive ownership, Dad said. Law's on our side. I froze, pressing myself against the wall, every muscle taut. Constructive ownership. He actually believed that. Sophia's voice chimed in quieter, a hint of unease. Caroline seemed upset yesterday. Jake snorted. Who cares? She always folds. Parents trained her that way. Poor Caroline, forever the responsible one. My breath caught. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking, and hit record. The screen glowed faintly as I held it close, praying it would pick up their voices. Mr. Patterson spoke next, gruff and assured. Once we're in deep enough, she won't fight. People like her don't like conflict. She'll move out on her own. Then it's ours. The word ours throbbed in my skull. My house, the only thing I had built with no help from anyone, was being spoken of like it was already deeded to them. I pressed my back harder into the wall, my heart racing. The floor creaked and I flinched, but their laughter covered the sound. Slowly I crept back upstairs, my chest tight, and collapsed onto the edge of the bed. The phone in my hand felt like both a weapon and a lifeline. I replayed the muffled recording, hearing Jake's arrogance, Sophia's compliance, the Pattersons' confidence. It was enough. Enough to prove I wasn't imagining things. But it wasn't enough to heal the wound inside me. I stared at the bare walls, memories clawing up again. Christmas morning, 10 years old, I'd begged for a chemistry set, but Sophia, 5 years younger, had unwrapped it, instead squealing while Mom laughed. She'll have more fun with it. I got a set of mittens. At Thanksgiving, I cooked half the meal in high school while Mom was at work, only for Sophia to walk in late lipstick, smeared, and be praised as the light of the family. And birthdays, God, birthdays. Mine forgotten, brushed aside, while hers were events with banners, balloons, music echoing down the block. Standing in the shadows of those celebrations, I had learned early what I was: the placeholder, the responsible one the sister meant to give way. Now they wanted me to give away my home. My phone lit up again, a text from Sophia. Don't stress, sis. Mom says it's better this way. One big happy family. You'll thank us. Anger surged hot and sharp in my chest. I typed back furiously, "This is my house. Stop now before it's too late." Then I erased it, thumb trembling, and locked the screen. Words wouldn't change them. Not this time. By late morning, I forced myself to go downstairs. Dust hung heavy in the air, workers tearing down what used to be my dining room wall. Sophia stood with her arms crossed, clipboard in hand, acting like the foreman. She glanced at me, smile tight. "Hey, don't look so gloomy. Once you see the finished product, you'll get it." I didn't respond. My eyes swept over the floor where cabinets once stood, the space where my grandmother's china cabinet had been. Gone. Just gone. Jake caught my look and smirked. "Relax, Caroline. We're adding value. House will be worth way more when we're done." I finally found my voice, low and shaking. "And who exactly will be living in this more valuable house?" They exchanged glances, then laughed as if I had cracked a joke. That laugh was gasoline on my fire. I turned on my heel, went outside, and sat in my car parked at the end of the street. I pulled up my banking app. 3 failed login attempts this week. My insurance company's voicemail from yesterday: "Please confirm the request to add household members to your policy." My pulse thundered in my ears. They weren't just stealing my space, they were reaching for my identity. I dialed Mrs. Howard, my elderly neighbor. She answered in her gentle, quavering voice. "Caroline, dear. Are you all right, Mrs. Howard?" I whispered, gripping the steering wheel. "Would you be willing to testify, if it comes to that you never heard me approve renovations?" There was a pause. Then her voice grew firm, more solid than I'd ever heard. "Absolutely. What they're doing to your home is disgraceful. You tell me when and where." Tears stung my eyes. At least one person was on my side. I ended the call, staring down the quiet suburban street. My parents lived only 20 minutes away, and yet I felt further from them than ever before. I thought of Mom's voice on the phone that night I overheard. "She doesn't need all that space anyway." It cut deeper than any hammer or saw. By the time dusk fell, I was exhausted mentally and physically. I checked into a cheap hotel off the highway, unable to stomach another night in the gutted shell of my home. The walls here were bland beige, the bed stiff, but at least no one was tearing it apart. I sat at the small desk, opening my laptop. I searched for constructive ownership law, Colorado. Article after article popped up and my chest tightened. They weren't entirely wrong. Adverse possession existed, though it wouldn't apply here. Still, the fact that they thought about it, planned for it, chilled me. I drafted notes, evidence, witnesses, timeline. Every detail mattered. But more than the facts, it was the rage that steadied me. I had been the good sister for too long. I had given and given only to be met with laughter and theft. I glanced at the recordings still saved on my phone. Jake's smugness, Sophia's complicity, Mr. Patterson's certainty. It was all there, proof. As the night deepened, I whispered into the stillness of the hotel room. This is not just about walls and furniture. This is about me. And I won't let them erase me again. I crawled into bed, exhaustion pulling at me, but my mind refused to quiet. Every creak in the hotel hallway made me flinch, as if Sophia might somehow be here too, prying into my life. Finally, just before dawn, I drifted off. But not before making myself a promise. Tomorrow, I would stop being the sister who caves. Tomorrow, I would become the woman who fights back. The morning light sliced through the hotel curtains, pale and unforgiving, as I sat hunched over the stiff desk chair with my laptop glowing in front of me. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, untouched. I wasn't here for comfort. I was here to prepare for war. The first step was securing my identity. My bank confirmed what I already suspected. 3 failed attempts to access my savings account had come from someone using my social security number. My heart pounded as the representative spoke. "Miss Mitchell, you should change everything immediately. We'll freeze your accounts and issue new numbers. It looks like someone close has your personal documents." I closed my eyes. My grandmother's locket gone. My birth certificate gone. All in Sophia's hands. From there, I called my insurance company. The woman on the other end sounded wary. "We received a call last week requesting to add household members to your policy. They couldn't answer your security questions, so we denied it." I nearly laughed, bitter and broken. My sister had thought of everything except the fact that I wasn't as weak as she assumed. By 10 o'clock, I was sitting across from a woman named Elena Ruiz, a property lawyer with sharp eyes and a sharper voice. I slid my phone across the table, the recording of Jake and the Pattersons spilling out into the quiet office. Elena's lips tightened as she listened. "This is fraud, trespass, and theft," she said finally. "They can't claim constructive ownership. That's not how Colorado law works. But we'll need to act fast. Document everything, file police reports, and prepare to serve them notice." I swallowed hard, the weight of the words pressing against my chest. For once, I wasn't just reacting. I was building my own plan. The next stop was the police station. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me as I sat with Detective Harris, his notebook open, his pen steady. I described everything: the missing jewelry, the stolen documents, the unauthorized renovations. His brows knit together. "Family makes this tricky," he said. "But theft is theft, and identity fraud is a crime. We'll need to send officers with you to recover your property and file a report on the damage." As I signed the forms, my phone lit up again. A text from Mom. "Sophia said you're back early. Don't cause a scene. She's doing what's best for everyone." My hand tightened around the pen until my knuckles ached. Best for everyone except me. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. The porch light glowed warm, the front door the same one I had opened 1,000 times as a girl. But when Mom answered, her smile was thin. "Caroline," she said, her voice clipped. "You look tired." "I am tired," I said, stepping inside. The living room smelled of cinnamon and polish, familiar and foreign all at once. Dad sat in his recliner, the evening news buzzing in the background. He muted it when he saw me, but his face was unreadable. I didn't waste time. "Sophia has gutted my house. She stole my documents, my jewelry. She's planning to move in permanently. I overheard her telling you about it." Mom flinched, then straightened, her chin lifting. "She told me she was making improvements." "You're so busy with work, Caroline. You don't need that big house to yourself." My chest tightened. Improvements. My bathroom is gone. My kitchen is rubble. They've stolen my identity. That isn't decorating. That's theft. Dad finally spoke, his voice heavy. She and Jake need a place. You've always been strong, Caroline. Can't you support them like you always have? The words sliced deeper than any blade. Support. As if decades of sacrifice hadn't been enough. You're asking me to give up my home, Mom's eyes flashed. Family shares. You've been selfish long enough. I stood frozen, staring at them, at the two people who were supposed to protect me. Every holiday memory surged up. Christmas mornings, when Sophia unwrapped gifts I'd begged for, Thanksgiving dinners, where my work was invisible, birthdays that slipped past unnoticed. All of it had led to this moment, where even my house, my one sanctuary, was being taken. Selfish, my voice cracked, sharp and shaking. I've given up everything for her since we were children. My toys, my clothes, my time, my money. And now you want me to give up my house? No. Not anymore. The room went still. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, Dad's eyes flickering away. The silence was louder than shouting. I turned to leave, my hands trembling. Mom's voice followed me, cold as stone. You'll regret this. Family is all we have. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap. I gripped my car door, chest heaving, the echo of her words clawing at me. But beneath the hurt, a fire burned. For the first time, I wasn't folding. I wasn't the weak one. Back at the hotel, I opened my laptop and typed up everything: dates, times, conversations, the recording transcribed word for word. I created folders for the evidence, labeling each one carefully. I printed copies at the front desk, the machine humming in the quiet lobby. Every page felt like armor. When I returned to my room, I placed the stack of papers on the nightstand. My phone buzzed again. A text from Sophia: don't drag outsiders into this. Mom says we can work it out as a family. Come back tomorrow and we'll talk. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Work it out as a family meant one thing: surrender. And this time I wouldn't. I slid my phone aside, pulled the blankets up around me, and whispered into the dark, tomorrow they'll see I'm not afraid. For the first time in weeks, I slept without waking in a panic. Because tomorrow the fight would begin in earnest, and this time I was ready. At 7 sharp, I pulled into my driveway, with Detective Harris and Officer Lane trailing behind me in their cruiser. A white city inspector van rolled up moments later, Mr. Keaton stepping out with a clipboard tucked under his arm. My lawyer Elena arrived last, her heels clicking against the pavement, her expression a mix of focus and fire. I gripped my house key, forcing my hands to stop trembling. The front yard looked deceptively normal, roses still blooming along the fence line, my blue shutters neat against the brick. But I knew the inside was a battlefield. Ready? Elena asked, her eyes locking with mine. I swallowed hard and nodded. We entered together. The smell hit me first: dust, wet paint, and something sour like rotting wood. The living room was worse than I remembered. Half the floorboards had been pulled up, furniture shoved into corners under plastic sheets. Sophia stood near the demolished wall, flipping through fabric swatches, as if this were an HGTV episode instead of a crime scene. She looked up, startled at the sight of the officers. Caroline, what's going on? Before I could answer, Detective Harris flashed his badge. We have a warrant to recover stolen property and to document unauthorized construction. Jake appeared from the gutted kitchen, his smirk instantly souring. You called the cops. Are you insane? I didn't authorize any of this. I said, my voice steady though my heart thundered. And you stole my documents and jewelry. That's a lie, Sophia's voice cracked, eyes darting to the Pattersons, who had just walked in from the back porch. Mr. Keaton, the inspector, ignored the outburst and began circling the kitchen, jotting notes. These walls were load-bearing, he muttered. This bathroom demo violates at least 3 building codes. No permits on file. He slapped a bright orange stop work order onto a bare stud, the paper fluttering in the breeze from a nearby fan. The workers, 2 young men with tool belts, froze. One stepped forward, eyes wide. We were told the owner approved this, he said. If we'd known. You know now, Mr. Keaton cut in. Pack up. Work is done here. Elena opened her briefcase and pulled out documents. This is a cease and desist order for all unauthorized renovations, and this, she handed Jake a folded paper, is a notice to vacate. You and Sophia are temporary guests, nothing more. Jake's face darkened, veins bulging in his neck. You can't evict us. We've invested money, sweat equity. That gives us rights. Not under Colorado law, Elena shot back. And certainly not when you stole documents to fake consent. Detective Harris reappeared from the hallway, a small wooden box in his hands. My wooden box. Found this in the bedroom the Pattersons are using. He opened it, and there it was, my grandmother's locket, my passport, my social security card, the brooch I thought I'd lost forever. My breath caught in my throat. That's ours, Mrs. Patterson, cried her face blotchy with fury. No, I said firmly, stepping forward, tears stinging my eyes. That's mine. All of it. Sophia's cheeks flushed crimson. Caroline, you spied on us, you brought strangers into our home. How could you? Our home. My voice cracked like a whip. This house is mine. I worked for it, I paid for it, I built it into something beautiful. And you destroyed it. You don't get to twist that into generosity. Jake lunged a step toward me, but Officer Lane immediately blocked him, one hand resting near his holster. The room went still. 2 hours, Detective Harris said evenly. You have 2 hours to pack your belongings and vacate. We'll remain here until you do. Sophia's lip trembled, and for a moment I saw the little sister she once was, begging for my sweater, for my toys, for my time. But then she hardened, narrowing her eyes at me. Mom and Dad will never forgive you for this. You're tearing the family apart. A lump rose in my throat, but I forced the words out. No, Sophia. You tore it apart when you chose to steal instead of ask. The workers began quietly collecting their tools, eyes avoiding mine. The Pattersons muttered to each other, gathering their coats. Jake stomped down the hall, dragging duffel bags, cursing under his breath. Sophia packed slowly, tears streaming, but when she passed me with her suitcase, her glare was icy. You'll regret this, she whispered. I didn't answer. By noon, the house was empty except for me, Elena, and the officers. Dust still lingered, debris scattered across the floors, but for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Elena touched my shoulder. We'll pursue restitution for the damage. Insurance will cover most of it, and I'll file for a restraining order. I nodded, though the words blurred through the fog of exhaustion. When everyone left, I stood in the middle of the gutted kitchen. The countertops were gone, the walls raw, the sink a gaping hole, but it was mine again. I walked upstairs, clutching my grandmother's locket to my chest, and sank onto the bare mattress. Tears slid down my cheeks, but they weren't just grief anymore. They were relief. The silence was overwhelming, heavy, but in it I heard something new. Not defeat, not erasure, a whisper of resolve. They were gone, and now it was my turn to rebuild. The phone rang just as I finished sweeping the last of the plaster dust into a trash bag. My arms ached, my throat burned from the grit in the air, and my entire body wanted to collapse into the half-covered bed upstairs. I glanced at the screen. Mom. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but something in me wanted to hear what excuse she would offer this time. I swiped to answer. How could you? Mom's voice cracked through the lines, sharp as broken glass. Sophia called me in tears. She said you had the police drag her and Jake out like criminals. What kind of sister does that? I leaned against the wall, staring at the wreckage of my kitchen. The kind of sister who's tired of being stolen from. The kind who watched her house gutted without permission. The kind whose personal documents and jewelry were hidden in their nightstand. Mom's intake of breath was loud, disbelieving. You're exaggerating. She told me it was just redecorating, and the jewelry, she probably borrowed it. You've always been so possessive, Caroline. Possessive? My laugh came out bitter. She ripped out my bathroom, tore down my walls, and forged my name to the insurance company. That's not borrowing. That's fraud. Dad's voice cut in faintly from the background. We raised you to support family, Caroline. What happened to that? What happened, I snapped, is that I supported her my entire life. My toys, my clothes, my money, my time. And now she tried to take my house. I won't let her. Mom's voice hardened. Family is all we have in this world. You'll regret pushing her away. No, I said, steady now. I regret letting it go on this long. I ended the call, my hands shaking, my breath shallow. For a long moment I stood in the silence, the weight of their words pressing down. My own parents saw me as the villain. My parents who had forgotten birthdays, who had praised Sophia while dismissing me, who now backed her theft of the only thing I had built for myself. My legs buckled and I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the dusty floor. Tears blurred my vision, but anger burned through them. If they wouldn't stand with me, I would stand alone. The next day, Elena arranged for me to meet with the insurance adjuster. I walked him through the house, pointing at every demolished wall, every ripped-up floorboard. He shook his head, muttering under his breath. This will take months, and the payout may not cover everything since you technically allowed them to stay here. They were temporary guests, I insisted, my voice sharp. Not owners, not renovators. I never gave consent. Elena's presence beside me steadied my nerves. We have police reports, recordings, witnesses. If they try to fight this, we'll take it further. The adjuster sighed. We'll process the claim. Just know it won't fix the emotional damage. No, it wouldn't. Nothing could. I spent that week clearing debris, boxing up what was salvageable, sleeping on an air mattress in the one room untouched by their hands. Each night, I lay awake, the silence pressing against my ears, broken only by the hum of the fridge in the gutted kitchen. My dreams were filled with walls crashing down, Sophia's laughter echoing as I ran from room to room, unable to save anything. On Friday, Linda called from work. Her voice was warm, careful. Caroline, I heard what happened. Don't worry about coming back right away. We'll cover you. I almost cried at her kindness. Thank you. I don't know how long this will take. Take the time you need, she said firmly. Your promotion isn't going anywhere. You earned it. When the call ended, I sat on the porch staring at the yard I'd planted with tulips last spring. They bloomed defiantly now, bright splashes of red and yellow against the chaos inside. Life insisting on growing despite destruction. That evening, I heard a car pull up. Mrs. Howard, my elderly neighbor, shuffled toward me with a casserole dish wrapped in foil. Thought you could use a hot meal, she said, her eyes soft. Tears pricked my eyes as I accepted it. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means. Oh, I do, she said. I've seen it all, Caroline. I've seen the noise, the trucks, the way they treated your home like theirs. You're not alone in this. Her words cracked something inside me. I wasn't alone. For once, someone believed me without excuses. That night, as I ate her casserole at the bare dining table, I made a promise to myself I would rebuild no matter how long it took. And I would not let Sophia or my parents make me doubt my worth again. But as I crawled into my makeshift bed, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Sophia. You can kick us out, but you can't erase family. Mom and Dad are on my side. Enjoy your empty house. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My chest tightened, but then I felt it, that same ember of fury sparking alive. Let her think I was empty. Let her think I was weak. Because she had no idea just how strong I was becoming. 2 weeks later, I sat in my living room, surrounded by the echoes of demolition, a notebook open on my lap, and my phone recording app running. The walls were scarred, the kitchen unusable, but I had a stack of evidence growing taller by the day: photos, receipts, witness statements. Each page was another brick in the wall I was building to protect myself. Elena had told me to stay alert, to document everything. They won't give up easily, she warned. People like Sophia and Jake don't just walk away. They come back. She was right. On a Thursday night, I returned from the hardware store with a bag of paint samples, determined to plan for restoration. As I turned onto my street, headlights flashed in my rearview mirror. A black SUV tailed me too closely, its beams glaring into my eyes. My stomach dropped. When I pulled into my driveway, the SUV slowed, paused, then rolled away into the darkness. My phone buzzed minutes later. A text from an unknown number: enjoy your house while you can. It won't last. I stood frozen in the foyer, staring at the gutted space, my chest heaving. This wasn't just family drama anymore. It was intimidation. The next morning, I gave the phone to Detective Harris. He scrolled through the messages, his brow furrowed. We'll trace it. Don't delete anything. And Caroline, don't be alone here at night. Get locks changed. Security cameras if you can. So I did. That weekend, I hired a locksmith and bought a set of cameras online, installing them myself with shaky hands and sweat running down my back. As the red recording lights blinked on, I finally exhaled. If they came back, I'd know. That Sunday, I met Elena at her office to go over the next steps. She spread documents across the table, photos of the damage, the orange stop work, order the police report with Detective Harris's notes. We'll be filing a restraining order this week, she said. And we're pursuing civil damages. They'll likely counterclaim, but with this evidence, you're on solid ground. I nodded, my throat tight. I never wanted it to come to this. Elena's gaze softened. I know. But sometimes the only way to stop manipulation is through the law. And Caroline, don't mistake standing up for yourself as cruelty. It's survival. Her words sat heavy in me, mixing with both shame and relief. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother again. She was in her rocking chair, the locket glinting on her chest, her voice calm. You kept it safe. You did what I asked. Don't let them take more than they already have. I woke with tears on my cheeks, clutching the recovered locket in my palm. Monday came, and so did more whispers of betrayal. I had lunch with a coworker, Anna, who leaned across the table, lowering her voice. I don't mean to meddle, but Sophia's been posting online. She's saying you kicked her out unfairly, that you're rich and heartless, leaving her and Jake homeless. My appetite vanished. She's telling people that Anna's eyes were apologetic. She painted you as the villain. But those who know you, we don't buy it. I forced a smile, though my hands shook under the table. Sophia was rewriting the story, spreading lies like wildfire, and I knew my parents were probably echoing the same version. That evening, I called them, desperate for clarity. Mom answered, her voice clipped. We heard about the court papers. Do you really need to drag family through the mud like this? I didn't drag anyone, I said, my voice rising. They stole from me. They destroyed my home. What was I supposed to do, Mom? Hand them the deed? You always exaggerate, she snapped. Sophia just wanted a place to raise a family. You should be happy to share. Dad's voice in the background resigned. We raised you better than this, Caroline. A laugh escaped me, raw and broken. No, you raised me to give, until there was nothing left. And now, I'm done. I ended the call before the tears came. Later, as I sat at the kitchen table staring at the gutted cabinets, my phone buzzed again. A message from Sophia this time. You think you won, but we're not finished. See you in court, sis. My stomach flipped, fear mixing with fury. But instead of crumbling, I hit record on my phone again, whispering into the microphone. This is proof. Every threat, every lie. I'm building my case brick by brick. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the quiet street, waiting for headlights that never came. And as dawn painted the sky pink and gold, I felt it, the ember of rage, the pulse of resolve. They wanted me scared, silenced, erased. But I wasn't the same Caroline who gave away sweaters, cars, time, and money without question. This time I was fighting back, and I would not stop until every lie was stripped bare and the truth stood shining, undeniable. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper, the kind of scent that clung to stone walls and polished floors. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tight in my lap, the locket I'd recovered from Sophia's nightstand, warm against my skin beneath my blouse. Elena leaned in, her voice steady. Remember, speak only when asked. Let the evidence speak louder than emotion. Across the aisle, Sophia sat with Jake and the Pattersons, their lawyer. A slick man in a pinstriped suit, shuffling papers with the confidence of someone used to intimidation. Sophia's eyes darted to mine, brimming with tears, her face carefully painted with innocence. I recognized the performance instantly. I'd seen it when she crashed Dad's car as a teenager and cried until he called it an accident. I'd seen it when she stole money from my wallet and swore she only borrowed. Today, her act had a new audience, a judge. "All rise," the bailiff commanded, and we stood as Judge Raines entered, his expression unreadable, eyes sharp. The proceedings began with opening statements. Elena rose first. "Your Honor, this is a case of betrayal that goes far beyond family drama. My client Caroline Mitchell is the sole legal owner of the property in question. Her sister Sophia and Sophia's husband unlawfully demolished parts of her home, stole her personal documents, and attempted to secure ownership through fraudulent means. Today we present proof of trespass, theft, and attempted fraud." The judge nodded, his pen scratching across the pad. Sophia's lawyer rose next, voice oily smooth. "Your Honor, this case is a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. My clients invested time, labor, and money into improving a home their sister abandoned for weeks at a time. They acted with good faith under the impression that they were welcome to make it their own. This isn't theft. It's a dispute between siblings best solved outside of court." I clenched my fists under the table. Good faith. My demolished kitchen was still taped off by the inspector. The first witness called was Mr. Keaton, the building inspector. He testified about the stop work order, the lack of permits, and the dangerous demolition of load-bearing walls. Had they continued, he said firmly, the entire structure could have been compromised. This was reckless and unauthorized. The defense attorney objected, claiming the work was cosmetic, but the judge shut him down with a single raised eyebrow. Next came Detective Harris. He held up the wooden box like it was Exhibit A in a movie. "We recovered these items: birth certificate, passport, social security card, jewelry, hidden in the defendant's bedroom. Miss Mitchell identified them as hers. They had no right to possess them." My breath caught as he displayed the locket. The judge studied it carefully, then scribbled another note. Finally, Elena queued up the audio recording on my phone. My heart hammered as Jake's voice filled the courtroom. "Once we put enough money into renovations, she can't just kick us out. We'll have equity, constructive ownership." Sophia's nervous laugh followed Caroline Cave's every time. Mom and Dad made sure of that. The room went still. The judge's pen stopped moving. Sophia's face drained of color. Jake glared at me, his jaw clenching so hard I thought it might crack. Mrs. Patterson muttered under her breath, while Mr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. When the recording ended, Elena looked at me and gave the smallest nod. The truth was out. Then the defense called their witnesses. To my horror, my parents walked in. Mom carried herself with brisk indignation, Dad with weary resignation. When sworn in, Mom wasted no time. Sophia just wanted a place to settle down. Caroline doesn't need all that space. She's single, always traveling for work. What's so wrong with sharing Elena Rose? Mrs. Mitchell, are you aware your daughter Sophia demolished an entire bathroom and kitchen without permits? Mom's lips thinned. She was improving it. And are you aware she stole Caroline's legal documents and jewelry? Mom hesitated, then shook her head. That's not the Sophia I know. The judge frowned, unimpressed. Dad's testimony was less fiery but cut deeper. Caroline has always been strong. Sophia needs more support. We thought it made sense for them to live together. I stared at him, the betrayal sinking like lead. Even here in front of a judge, they couldn't see the truth. When they stepped down, I felt hollow. But Elena squeezed my hand under the table. Trust the evidence, she whispered. In closing, Sophia's lawyer painted me as cold, selfish, unwilling to help family. Elena countered with calm precision. Boundaries are not selfish. They are the foundation of respect. Without them, there is only exploitation. Judge Raines leaned back, hands steepled. I've heard enough. The room held its breath as he continued. The evidence is clear. Miss Caroline Mitchell is the sole legal owner of the property. Sophia Mitchell and Jacob Patterson acted without authorization, committed theft, and performed dangerous unpermitted construction. They are hereby ordered to vacate, permanently return all stolen items, and pay restitution for damages not covered by insurance. A restraining order will also be issued. Relief and sorrow crashed over me at once. Sophia gasped, tears spilling as Jake slammed his fist against the table. My parents whispered furiously, Mom's glare burning into me like a brand. All rise, the bailiff said as the judge left. As the courtroom emptied, Sophia brushed past me, her eyes blazing. You'll regret this, Caroline. Family is forever. You can't erase me. I turned, my voice steady for the first time in years. No, Sophia, you erased us when you tried to steal what was mine. She froze, then spun away, Jake dragging her out with muttered curses. I gathered my things, the locket heavy against my chest. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was standing. The house was silent when I returned from court, but it wasn't the peaceful silence I remembered. It was hollow, echoing off stripped walls and bare floors, the scars of Sophia's renovations gaping like open wounds. I set my bag down and stood in the middle of the gutted kitchen, letting the reality sink in. I had won in court on paper, at least. But the victory felt fragile inside these ruins. I traced my hand along the jagged edge where my countertop had once been. The quartz I'd saved for polish to perfection was gone. My grandmother's china cabinet had vanished, too hauled away in the chaos. The orange stop work order still fluttered on the wall, a reminder that everything they'd done here was illegal. Yet it didn't erase the fact that my home had been violated. I spent the next few days cataloging damage for the insurance claim. Elena guided me through the paperwork, steady as always. Take photos of everything, she instructed. Even the smallest crack. They'll try to lowball you, so I did every broken tile, every hole in the drywall, every missing appliance. The camera clicked like a heartbeat in the emptiness. Nights were harder. I slept on the air mattress in the guest room, the faint smell of plaster dust clinging to the sheets. Every creak in the house made me jump. I kept replaying Sophia's last words outside the courthouse. You'll regret this. I told myself it was just her anger speaking, but part of me feared she meant it. One evening, Mrs. Howard stopped by with a bag of groceries. You can't live on takeout forever, she said, placing apples and bread on my counter, or what was left of it. Her kindness nearly broke me. Over tea at my bare dining table, she shared what she'd seen during the weeks I was gone. Trucks every day. Loud voices late at night. I tried to ask questions, but Sophia brushed me off. Said it was all arranged with you. I didn't believe her, not for a second. Thank you, I whispered, my throat tight, for seeing me, for believing me. She reached across the table, her wrinkled hand covering mine. Don't let their voices drown out your own, Caroline. You've worked too hard for this home. The next morning I met with the contractor recommended by the insurance company. A kind-eyed man named Victor walked slowly through the house, shaking his head. They butchered it, he muttered. Load-bearing wall here, dangerous. Bathroom demo left the pipes exposed, could have caused flooding. Kitchen wiring's a mess. We'll need to start from scratch in these areas. The numbers he quoted made my stomach twist. Even with insurance, I'd be paying thousands out of pocket. Still, I signed the papers. I had no choice. While repairs were scheduled, I tried to focus on work. Linda called often, her encouragement unwavering. The clients in Seattle specifically mentioned you, she said one morning. We're finalizing your promotion. Senior marketing director is yours. I should have been thrilled, and part of me was, but as I hung up staring at the gutted living room, I realized the irony. Professionally, I was soaring. Personally, I was clawing myself out of wreckage. One evening, as I sorted through boxes Sophia had shoved into the basement, I found my father's old journals. He'd passed when I was 20, but I'd kept them hidden away. The leather was cracked, pages yellowed. Flipping through, I found an entry written in his neat handwriting, Caroline deserves peace. She's the strong one, but strength needs a home too. Tears blurred the ink. I had forgotten those words, buried them under years of being told to give, to share, to sacrifice. My father had seen me, and somehow in this ruined house I felt him urging me not to give up. A week later, the first crew arrived to begin repairs. The sound of hammers was different this time, measured professional, not chaotic. I sat on the porch with coffee, watching as they carried in lumber. For the first time in months, progress didn't feel like destruction. Still, Sophia lingered in the shadows. One night as I locked up, I noticed tire tracks in the driveway that didn't match Victor's crew. A note was wedged into the mailbox: "Family doesn't evict family. You'll regret this." No signature, but I knew whose hand had written it. I turned the note over to Detective Harris the next day. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Restraining order means she can't contact you, Caroline. We'll document this as a violation. If it continues, she'll face charges." Walking out of the station, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear that Sophia wouldn't stop. Relief that finally someone was willing to hold her accountable. That night I stood in my half-rebuilt kitchen, the smell of fresh wood stronger than dust, and whispered to myself, "This house is mine. This life is mine. And no one, not even my own sister, will take it from me again." For the first time since this nightmare began, I almost believed it. The courthouse was colder than I remembered, a cavern of polished marble and echoing footsteps. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands wrapped tightly around the silver locket at my neck. Elena arranged papers in neat stacks beside me, her voice low and calm. "Stay steady, Caroline. Today isn't about feelings, it's about facts." Across the aisle, Sophia swept in with Jake, and the Pattersons trailing behind her. She wore a pale pink dress, her hair curled to perfection, as if she were attending a garden party rather than a hearing. When her eyes met mine, they glinted with something between pity and triumph. Jake smirked, leaning close to whisper in her ear. The Pattersons sat stiff-backed, whispering to their lawyer, who looked far too self-assured for my liking. "All rise," the bailiff commanded, and Judge Holloway entered, a stern man with silver hair and a gaze that cut through pretense. We rose as one, then sat when he gestured. Elena stood first, her voice clear. "Your Honor, this case is simple. Caroline Mitchell is the sole legal owner of her home. Her sister Sophia and Sophia's husband unlawfully demolished and altered the property, stole documents and heirlooms, and attempted to coerce Caroline into surrendering her rights. We present physical evidence, witness testimony, and audio recordings that prove their intent to defraud." The defense lawyer rose smoothly. "This is a family quarrel dressed up as a crime. My clients invested money and labor into improving the home, believing they had implicit consent. They acted in good faith. At worst, this is a civil misunderstanding, not fraud." The judge's eyes narrowed. "We'll see." The first witness was Mr. Keaton, the inspector. He laid out photographs of gutted bathrooms, torn down walls, and exposed wiring. "None of this work was permitted," he said firmly. "It violates multiple safety codes. Frankly, it endangered the entire structure." The defense objected, claiming repairs, but Judge Holloway silenced him with a sharp look. Then came Detective Harris. He lifted the wooden box I knew so well, recovered from the defendant's bedroom. Inside, Miss Mitchell's passport, Social Security card, and jewelry belonging to her late grandmother. She confirmed ownership. These items were hidden without her consent. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I blinked hard against the sting of tears. Elena played the audio next. The tinny sound filled the air. Jake's arrogant laugh, his voice bragging. "Once we put enough money into renovations, she can't just kick us out. We'll have equity. Constructive ownership." Then Sophia's voice, "Caroline caves every time. Mom and Dad made sure of that." The silence afterward was heavier than stone. Judge Holloway leaned forward, his expression dark. "Your Honor," Elena said softly, "these are not the words of people acting in good faith. These are the words of people planning a theft." The defense shuffled, but before they could regroup, their lawyer called the next witnesses, my parents. Mom walked to the stand with her chin high, Dad trailing like a shadow. Sworn in, she wasted no time. Sophia is my youngest. She needed stability. Caroline has that house all to herself. She's single, always gone for work. What's wrong with letting families share Elena Rose? Mrs. Mitchell, are you aware your daughter Sophia demolished an entire bathroom and kitchen without permits? Mom's lips pinched. She was improving it. And are you aware she had Caroline's personal documents hidden in her bedroom? Mom hesitated, eyes flickering. That's not the Sophia I know. The judge's pen scratched across his notes. Dad's testimony was softer but no less damning. Caroline has always been strong. Sophia needs more help. We thought living together would make sense. I sat frozen, the words cutting deeper than any hammer or saw. Even here, with evidence piled high, they couldn't see me. When they stepped down, I clenched my locket so hard it left an imprint in my palm. Elena's closing argument was quiet but searing. Boundaries are not selfish. They are essential. To strip someone of their home, their identity, their safety, and call it family, that is not love. That is exploitation. The defense sputtered about sweat equity and implicit consent, but their words rang hollow. Judge Holloway leaned back, his voice final. The evidence is overwhelming. Caroline Mitchell remains the sole legal owner of her home. Sophia Mitchell and Jacob Patterson are ordered to vacate, immediately return all stolen items, and pay restitution for damages not covered by insurance. A restraining order is granted. Any further attempts to claim ownership will result in criminal charges. My breath left me in a rush. Sophia gasped, clutching Jake's arm, his face twisted with rage. The Pattersons whispered furiously, their lawyer's mask of confidence shattered. The bailiff called, "All rise," but I barely heard it. My heart was pounding too loud. As the courtroom emptied, Sophia brushed past me. Her voice was low, venomous. You think you've won. This isn't over. You'll regret betraying family. I turned, my voice steady, my eyes locked on hers. No, Sophia. The only betrayal here was yours. For the first time, she faltered. Then Jake pulled her away, muttering curses under his breath. I walked out into the sunlight, the courthouse steps warm beneath my feet. The battle wasn't over. Repairs would take months. My parents' disappointment would linger. Sophia's threats might resurface. But for the first time in years, I felt unshaken. I had stood my ground. I had chosen myself. And no verdict, no whisper, no lie could ever take that away again. 3 days after the verdict, I watched from the upstairs window as Sophia and Jake hauled the last of their belongings into the back of a dented pickup truck. The Pattersons stood on the curb, arguing over who would carry what, their voices sharp in the cool morning air. For hours they stomped through my house, slamming doors, muttering curses, dragging boxes that left new gouges in the hardwood floors I had once polished myself. When the truck finally sputtered to life and rolled down the street, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The silence that followed was thick, almost holy. My house was mine again, but it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a battlefield after the soldiers have fled, empty, ruined, but still standing. I walked downstairs and stood in the middle of my gutted kitchen. The smell of sawdust and mildew clung to the air. Bare studs jutted from the walls, wires dangled where my light fixtures had been, and the floor was stripped to rough plywood. I ran my fingers over the edge of the sinkless counter and whispered to myself, "You're safe now. It's over." But it wasn't over, not really. Winning in court didn't erase the damage. That afternoon, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer when I saw Mom flash on the screen. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "You humiliated your sister," Mom said, her voice quivering with anger. "Police, lawyers, a judge. Was that really necessary? Family solves problems privately. She destroyed my home, Mom. She stole from me. What would you have me do?" Her silence was short but scalding. "You've always been cold, Caroline. You care more about property than blood. Your father and I are devastated." The words sliced me open. "No, Mom. I care about respect, about boundaries. Things you've never asked Sophia to learn." Her reply was sharp. "You'll regret this. Family is all we have." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, the echo of her voice heavy in the room. Even after everything, even after a judge himself declared I was right, my parents still saw me as the villain. That evening, I scrubbed plaster dust from the floor until my arms ached, but nothing could erase the sting of that call. By midnight, I lay on my air mattress in the half-finished guest room, staring at the cracked ceiling. The silence of the house pressed down on me, but somewhere inside I felt an ember of defiance. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't selfish. For once I had protected myself. The next week blurred into a routine of repairs and paperwork. Insurance adjusters filed their reports, contractors submitted estimates that made my stomach twist, and Elena guided me through claims and forms. "It'll take time," she said gently, "but you're moving forward." One afternoon I received a call from Linda. Her voice carried a rare excitement. "Caroline, I have good news. Seattle was a massive success. The client specifically requested you for future campaigns. Congratulations, you're officially Senior Marketing Director." The words washed over me like sunlight after months of storm. I thanked her, my throat tight. The irony stung. I was being promoted at work, celebrated for my vision and discipline, while at home I was treated like an interloper in my own life. But the contrast clarified something. I was seen and respected where it mattered. That night, I lit a candle in my bedroom, sitting cross-legged on the air mattress. I opened my father's old journal, the one I had found in the basement. His words steadied me again. "Caroline deserves peace. Strength needs a home, too." The next day, I found a letter in the mail. No return address. My heart sank as I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable, Sophia's. "Jake left me. I can't pay rent. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I sat at the kitchen table for hours, the letter spread out before me. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to tear it up to shield myself from the cycle I knew too well. But another part, the older sister, who once gave away sweaters and toys and money, ached to reach out. That evening, I called Dr. Chen, the therapist Elena had recommended. Over the phone, I told her everything: the trial, the verdict, the letter. She listened quietly before saying, "Caroline, forgiveness doesn't mean access. Boundaries protect you. You can have compassion for your sister without inviting her to harm you again." I hung up feeling lighter, though the conflict still churned inside me. I looked around at my house, the half-built kitchen, the gutted bathroom, the piles of boxes. This place had nearly been stolen from me, but it was also where I had finally stood up for myself. Before bed, I drafted a reply to Sophia but didn't send it. I needed time. For the first time in years, I realized I had the power to choose. Not to be the good sister, not to be the scapegoat, but to be free. As I lay in the quiet, I touched the locket at my throat and whispered to myself, "This house will be my sanctuary again. And this time, no one will take it from me." A year after the day I walked into my ruined home, the house finally looked like mine again. The walls were painted in soft cream. The hardwood floors gleamed under the light of a new chandelier, and the kitchen sparkled with quartz counters I'd chosen myself. The bathroom had a deep, soaking tub, the kind I'd dreamed of for years. Every fixture, every tile, every color was my choice. Not Sophia's, not Jake's, not anyone else's. The night of the housewarming, I stood by the dining table and breathed in the scent of garlic bread baking in the oven. Laughter floated in from the living room where Mrs. Howard chatted with Elena and Linda. My colleagues from work brought wine, and Victor, the contractor, who had rebuilt everything with such care, sat telling stories about botched jobs he'd fixed over the years. I raised my glass and looked around the table. "Thank you all," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "When I thought I'd lost everything, you reminded me what family really means. Respect, care. Standing by someone when the world is against them." They clinked their glasses and warmth spread through me, not the fragile warmth of seeking approval, but the solid glow of belonging. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the guests had gone, I sat alone in the living room. The fire crackled softly. On the mantel sat my grandmother's locket, polished and shining again. I traced it with my fingers, and thought of all that had happened, the betrayal, the trial, the silence from my parents. Mom and Dad hadn't visited, not once. For months I carried the ache of their absence like a stone in my chest. But over time I learned to set it down. Dr. Chen's words echoed in my mind, forgiveness doesn't mean access. 2 weeks ago, Sophia wrote again. This time, the letter was longer, shaky handwriting across 3 pages. She admitted Jake had left her for good, that she was drowning in debt, that therapy had forced her to see how entitlement had poisoned her. She ended with, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. I read it 3 times before placing it in the drawer of my desk. I hadn't written back yet. Maybe one day. Maybe never. The difference now was that I had a choice. For once my life wasn't dictated by guilt or obligation. That evening, sitting by the fire, I whispered to my father's memory. You were right. Strength does need a home, and I finally built one. I thought back to the girl who returned from a business trip to find her world in ruins, who overheard her own sister whispering to their mother about stealing her house. That girl had been afraid, overwhelmed, desperate for approval. I wasn't her anymore. I was the woman who had stood in court and said no. The woman who rebuilt not just walls and floors but her own boundaries. I took out my phone and recorded a short message for the viewers who had followed my journey. Have you ever had to draw a line even when it meant standing against the people closest to you? For me, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But protecting what's yours, your home, your peace, your dignity, isn't selfish. It's survival. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear yours. Leave me a comment about a time you chose self-respect over obligation. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. And remember, love without respect isn't love at all. It's control, and you deserve better than that. I ended the recording and set the phone down. The firelight flickered against the freshly painted walls, and for the first time in a long time I felt whole. The house was quiet but not empty anymore. It was filled with something stronger than family ties, my own voice, my own choices, my own strength. And this time, I knew no one could take it away.